Everybody, Jason Bermas here. Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We're going to play the second part of that independent media alliance panel on Palantir, AI weapons, and beyond. But because we have a little bit of time, and obviously there is a lot going on, not only in the world, but specifically in Los Angeles right now, I thought I would give you just a brief take of what I think is going on there, and unfortunately some of the pitfalls that I'm seeing by well-meaning people. And what do I mean by that? First and foremost, if there was going to be a place for a powder keg of protests and violence, LA was obviously it on the immigration issue. We will see what happens in the coming days, weeks, and months if, in fact, this is able to spread to other areas where you can get a somewhat organic response to the actions of Trump and his administration via deportation. And what do I mean by that? Obviously, Los Angeles, California, is especially, right, as a state, has probably more illegals per capita than 90% of the United States. Texas would be another example of one of those states that has a plethora of quote-unquote illegal immigrants, and you could therefore get somewhat of an organic response. This, of course, becomes more than an organic response when you do get these quote-unquote NGOs involved and they start paying for people to be there. And once you start paying for people to be there on a mass scale, it makes it a lot easier for provocateurs, law enforcement, or otherwise, because at this point, people that may be in the employ of certain agencies, whether it be the NSA, the CIA, the DOD, etc., there are always special operations, black operations, and of course, quote-unquote, rogues. Now, other than that, you can circumvent those issues by utilizing those agents of chaos to provoke and escalate situations with fire, violence, etc. You can do that, but you can also just take it privatized or outside of the country, which are really two different flavors to the same brand of ice cream, if you will. And once again, you look at something like, well, if I wanted to employ an intelligence agency to gather intelligence and maybe compromise somebody, you go with Black Cube, which are ex-IDF out of Israel. Or maybe you just use Mossad directly. If you need something large scale, like a false flag that has been discussed, and I'm going to get into that in a moment, an act of violence where somebody is killed or murdered, or a group of people that you then blame on one side or the other to, again, escalate these things and make it appear as though we're in some kind of a civil war. I was outside today. Guys, in this country, there is no civil war, and we are not on the brink of one. I just want to make that extremely clear. All these will be packaged and manufactured pockets of violence, okay? Now, if you are able to do that, unfortunately, and bring somebody in that does cause violence, and all of a sudden this thing does explode, you could see, the BLM riots 2.0. I've discussed this with other people. They think it can go East Coast. I don't know. I think that Mayor Eric Adams has kind of bent the knee a little bit and would regulate it, but New York is a large, large place. That is, obviously the tipping point. You could probably get it into Arizona, New Mexico, again, possibly Texas, and you're going to have a lot of opposition there pretty easily with the powder keg that is blown up. And let me talk about that powder keg for just one more moment before we go to this Independent Media Alliance panel. Posted a video where a riot cop clearly clearly targets a member of the press, the Australian press, and shoots either rubber bullets or beanbags directly at the press. I was horrified when I saw people making excuses as though the press shouldn't be in quote unquote war zones, coming down on them because of their behavior during the COVID 1984 nightmare. Those are separate issues. You do not target unarmed individuals that are there to record what is going on, no matter how they are spinning it. Period. Full stop. I'm going to do a whole show on LA, on that issue, and more. But right now, the IMA panel continues on Palantir.
You know, and then it's money that it looks like it's private money. And Peter Thiel's got a venture capital fund. You know, I mean, he's so where is the money coming from? Well, it's coming from these VCs, and they're, you know, it's seed funding and maybe a second round or whatever. And we're just trying to go public. And if you're a tech, you know, guy starting your company, you're just constantly looking for money. I mean, it's half of your job is finding more money. Sometimes you don't get to choose who you take the money from, or and if the government comes to you or the CIA, maybe you go, no, I'm not interested. But what's the difference between Google Ventures and the CIA to me? Nothing really. And maybe just one layer of one hop away, but it feels like it gives tech companies plausible deniability to say, well, we're not taking money from the CIA. We're taking it from you know, some VC. And it's like, well, yeah, but the CIA is on their board. So
right. And the question remains, or rather the point to make, is that whether or not they're aware of it, if it's the case, is irrelevant in the context of whether this is what we're dealing with, you know, and it's willful ignorance. And, you know, a lot of people, I mean, it may even be that they just don't even care. Like maybe they have no objections anyway, so why even look? You know, so it's just a very important thing to think about how much this overlaps. There's Derek come back and his internet had crashed. Well, I was going to jump into from there the larger conversation about where
Peter Thiel took me out.
Yeah, as well as maybe the main core point to discuss. But Derek, I'll throw it to you because you were going to go to a point there before we move forward.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out, I have my article. I don't know if you still have it pulled up, Ryan, the one, Welcome to the Palantir World Order. I had, basically this article is a summary of all the different projects Palantir is doing with the Trump administration. A few of them have been mentioned, you know, the IRS partnership, helping ICE find people. They're working on a nuclear energy project, which is part of helping, you know, power all the AI centers and data centers they want to build. And there's a few others, and each of these does have Palantir, Thiel connections. But I specifically have a section called the Doge Thiel connection. And I was building on a previous article that I wrote right after the election, once Trump started naming people to his cabinet. And at that time, I found at least 10 people who were what I was calling Peter Thiel acolytes in Trump's administration in different positions. That's J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, David Sachs, Howard Lutnick, Jim O'Neill at the HHS, Ken Howry, who's the ambassador to Denmark, Jacob Hellberg, Michael Kratsios, and on. And then this is kind of like an update to it where there's been new reporting since then, some in the mainstream and just others digging. And I list out a bunch of people. I'm not going to go through all the names because the names probably won't be familiar to most people. But the point is, these are former employee of Palantir, former software engineer at Palantir, formerly of Anduril, which is another Thiel project, chief information officer at Palantir, former Thiel fellow, political donations from Thiel, formerly Anduril. So these are just all sorts of different people in different places, but mostly working with Doge. And so by my last count, and this article is over a month now, there was 18 to 20 people directly connected to Peter Thiel. There may be some more, you know, looser connections, but people who worked with him directly or received money from him, worked in one of his organizations, et cetera. And also, and I sent these other links, Ryan. I don't know if you were able to open them. They're in the private chat, but I can't claim credit for this. But somebody sent this to me this morning that apparently the guy who, so this is like a thread, shout out to Jurassic Carl. I have no idea who he is. He just sent this to me. But this thread goes through and you can see how the name he's tagged is not showing up there because apparently the guy blocked him. But if you go to _J_Baxter_, that guy apparently is a former Palantir employee. And in that thread, they show his resume and they show his positions with Palantir. And he's also, I think his title is Chief Engineer of Community Notes. So you got a former Palantir employee engineer who's actually in charge of Twitter's community notes program. And that's just another, see right there's community notes, founding ML lead, staff ML engineer at X, and from MIT. And yeah, you can get more into his background and find out he worked for Palantir. So that was just another random connection that I'd never heard of, but just to show this relationship between Doge, Elon Musk, Twitter, etc. I mean, there's so many of them. I'm sure the web is even bigger than I'm talking about here, and I'm sure you guys have other insights. But yeah, I just wanted to make that point, that for those who don't quite realize how close Elon is to Palantir, there you go. You can go scroll through his resume, and people can find that. It's extensive. It's extensive, and you know how that relates to whatever spat's going on with Trump. Obviously, we shared earlier, there's some theories, but all I know is that the current Trump administration, the second Trump 2.0, is knee deep with Palantir. And if Palantir isn't a description of, isn't a representation of the deep state, I don't know what is. And including the fact that we've already covered the CIA connections and origins, but I'll just reemphasize the two heads of the company. Many of them, many of the other co-founders are also connected to the PayPal mafia, but Alex Karp and Peter Thiel are Bilderberg steering committee members. So that means next week, when this hidden ruling class that, as Jason Bermas said, no mainstream media is reporting on, barely independent media still pays attention to it these days, the two heads of this massive company with all these U.S. contracts and military industrial complex contracts will be, steering that meeting along with other people, including former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt.
And I think this is, it's so hard to miss how invasive, how completely all-encompassing this has become. And maybe you don't mind that. Maybe you think this is somebody, just going after the deep state data, despite very clearly taking all of the personal data about you, and that's been, verified. The argument being out there today that they're just going to use this to go after the other, the bad government, which is just patently false. So let's talk about where this goes forward. I want to talk about the overlap of this as it goes into the connection of the Great Reset, let's say. Build Back Better. And then let's talk about the AI direction and how that's becoming all-encompassing everywhere. But I was hoping to get Jason's thought on this since he put this out. But I think this is a very important thing to think about, right? And there's not to be that you think it is the same thing or the same people, but that the idea of where the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum kind of vision and where that's going, what do you guys think about that in regard to what's currently happening? Is it the same thing? Is it just with a different flavor? I'm curious what you guys think.
Well, let me just say this, just because Derek has been mentioning Alex Karp a lot. Alex Karp is kind of on that media hype train via the World Economic Forum and these other globalist institutions constantly. He's the one showing up to CES. I forget exactly. I'm not sure if it was the World Economic Forum. It may have been. It may have been one of those offshoots, but just 3 weeks ago, I did a watch along with him on a forum with other people from Google and other international AI companies kind of talking about this. It was always unsettling to me and always a bit surreal. I remember not believing it when it first came across during the COVID 1984 nightmare that there was this idea of a Great Reset by the World Economic Forum. I'm like, no. They're not really doing this. And then there was that panel with Schmidt, with Kissinger before he died, espousing this Great Reset agenda on behalf of the World Economic Forum. I was kind of blown away. I think they are in line with the same agenda. But again, you have to have those opposing sides, right? You've got so many of these people blindsided by the idea that Peter Thiel is some kind of libertarian, right? That's the mask that he wears. Yet, you go back to my 2013 film Shade, and Webster Tarpley, probably one of the biggest socialists out there, rightly pointed out that Thiel had plans for a private island with no laws whatsoever. And if you think that that's fiction, remember, this is the guy that got convicted in a court of law for running offshore experiments to try to cure herpes. I wonder why, Pete. I'm just saying, like a guy that will be that wild is wild enough to try to create his own island or his own vision for government. And, Alex Karp doesn't get brought in. And you look at Karp and he's got such Gates vibes, right? Like, let's put the sweater on Karp. Let's put the wacky glasses and the haircut on Karp. every time I see Karp actually get challenged on his bull snap, he does not do well. He gets extremely excited. He talks extremely quickly, and he basically, gives this jingoistic, answer that we've got to do it or the bad guys are going to do it, so we're going to do it. That's it, right? That's the big thing. And when Peter Thiel was put on the spot again on Lavender, I mean, it's the clip of the year so far. He's visibly uncomfortable. He forgets the second part of the question altogether and has to ask it. He stutters, he stammers, and then he gives, again, this Johnny nonsense answer that if he capitulates to her point and even makes a comment on it, then somehow we're governing the world from Cambridge. As if Palantir isn't advocating to be a large part of the global police force anyway, and not just advocating for it, they're part of it.
I don't know, man. According to Alex Jones, they're just a little startup company that, and they're really shaking up the deep state because they're outside. That's what he said. That's what he, like, word for word.
I heard that original rant. He walked a lot of that back today, is all I'm going to say. Stone came on, and Stone was rightfully more critical.
Well, because it doesn't matter what you said.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Steve. I'm just telling you he walked a bunch of that Palantir stuff back. I watched that original, Palantir's just coming in and trying to, become, challenge the old deep state Raytheon, blah, blah, blah.
Turns out I looked into it, and hey, y'all, to the best of my determination now, not yesterday. I was busy. I was barbecuing. I was out with my family. I took a dip in the river. I communed with nature and the Lord. But today, this morning, I looked into it a little bit, and I found out maybe they're not the best.
And he also blamed it on the left, which it's cartoonish, the argument that was made based on basic facts that anybody can prove. That's what really frustrated me about it. We laughed about it on AM Wake Up, and it's that, the point is simply that it's very clear that there's an army of sycophants out there that are going out of their way. Like, I laugh more about the, Benny Johnson cat turd type. They're like, it's a great day and Trump's doing everything we want, winning, #promises kept all day, like just trying to put out these side steps to be like, don't pay attention to it's that meme. Everything's fine. That's what I feel all day today. They're all going like, everything's okay. Stop paying attention. But I think that the Karp aspect of it is correct, as you said. And by the way, Jason, before I forget, send me a link to Shade so I can include that in the show notes. I wasn't able to find it on, one that I want to share. But the clip for Karp that I'll play in a second is worth watching because he is on a recent channel. I think it's MSNBC, and it's just very apparent. I think it was Jimmy Dore that said, she doth protest too much, kind of a point where it's just like, you can clearly tell that he's like just freaking out about what the New York Times is writing. And I think he's lying in very basic ways. But I'd like to talk about
I want to add something to that.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Real quick about what Jason said, just to pick up on that thread, because we talk about Alex Karp and Jason's right. He deserves more attention. Peter Thiel is becoming more well known, but also we have to think about Palmer Luckey. I saw somebody mentioned him in the comments. He's also a lesser known Palantir co-founder.
We covered a lot of Lucky while you were out, by the way, Derek.
I just want to mention he was on 60 Minutes recently, and he basically did the same dance that Karp did that you were just describing, Jason, where he just like, we got to do some stuff. He's like, he's the cool flip-flop wearing, mullet having billionaire, PayPal mafia, and just they try to brand him. He's just such an outsider, renegade. But he had the same kind of responses that both Karp and Thiel. Thiel said, oh, well, I just defer to Israel. Whatever they do, I just trust the IDF. They know what they're doing. And Karp's like, well, we're trying to kill terrorists, and maybe we kill some people, other people. And Palmer Luckey pretty much has the same argument. They're like, well, we got to build these things. Otherwise, other bad people will. And that might lead some bad places, but if we don't do it, other people are going to. So I just want to mention, I'm glad you guys talked about him before, but none of them have any sort of morals or any ethics about this at all.
If they also Jimmy don't Buffett have was a war criminal, it would be Palmer Luckey. That's all I'm saying.
Another common denominator I think is important. None of these guys have children. They have no stake in this.
Right.
This is a common thread I've noticed with a lot of these guys. Yeah, I think your worldview changes. I mean, it has to when you have kids, and some people, age is a thing. Some in the case of Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, it's their sexuality prevents them from having kids unless they want to buy them. But there's a lot of this going on. I'm very distrustful of those people. The people that are running weapon systems that don't have any skin in the game is a big problem to me.
I agree. I mean, you guys, let's just play that. It's a little bit long. We can stop it if you guys like. Let's play this clip. And anybody jump in, you want to have a comment, I'll pause it. Let's watch this. So I think this is actually a really, I feel it's like self-evident that he's really uncomfortable. And as you said, he's usually pretty erratic. To me, this seems like it's on overdrive. And this is very recently post New York Times article on how they discuss this. Jump in if you have a comment.
Palantir platform, despite what you might read at the New York Times, is actually the most secure, the hardest platform in the world to manipulate and change. Of course, any technology can be abused. But if you wanted to abuse the technology, if you wanted to use the deep state to unlawfully surveil people, the last platform on the world you would pick is Palantir because of the granular way we segment and put together, and the security models and the access control models that are in Foundry natively, not a built-on addendum. And by the way,
I'll add that Foundry I looked into in general, and it's not hard to find these overlaps, especially since they align themselves with the strategic partnership with Israel in January 2024. But the Foundry is very much overlapped with Israel in a lot of ways. And Foundry is like the main thing being put into every one of these agencies in this country to secure the data. So even if it is as secure as they say, which I wouldn't doubt, it's about who has access to that and who can use it. And it's clear who does today.
That focus on civil liberties is making us really rich, which drives the woke, pagan, religious practicing, Neanderthal thinking people who ignore technology absolutely nuts on the right and the left while we're building value. By the way,
Did he just admit there's a woke left and woke right? I think he did.
I asked for permission before I went nuts from our wonderful, slightly conservative, and highly substantive partner. And he gave me permission to embarrass him. He didn't realize it'd be this embarrassing.
I think it comes with the territory.
These are my views, not his.
Okay, so Alex, let's get into that. New York Times has an article. Here's the headline. Trump taps Palantir to compile data on Americans. They paint a pretty Orwellian picture
can we pause
of what
for
you
just a
and the
moment?
Trump...
Yeah, no, please jump in. That's anytime you have a comment. Go ahead.
Did Elon drop by Alex's office and be like, yo, buddy, I'm gonna need you to hold my briefcase. They're kicking me out of DC this weekend. And Alex like cracked it open. And all of a sudden it started glowing like on Pulp Fiction. And it was just, Mars era ketamine. And he was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this with my daily Adderall and my cocaine. And then got on TV to go do that because he was out there waving his arms like he was being inflated and trying to sell used cars in a bad neighborhood. He was out there flopping. It was a little weird. It was. That's supposed to be a speech that lends confidence to the Charlie, you're in media relations. Explain this, man. Juxtapose that with what you would tell a 22-year-old athlete.
He looks like he's selling washing machines on Memorial Day weekend. He's out of control. When the Adderall kicks in, you just have to go with it, I suppose.
Has anybody seen the movie 12 Monkeys?
Yeah.
Remember Brad Pitt in that?
Yeah, you're right. He has a very similar.
He's very, very similar energy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point. I mean, the character is meant to be erratic and like mentally unstable, right? And so it's a good parallel if you think about it.
This is a guy who thinks he's going to be thrown out of a window by far right Hamas at any given moment, and that's why he needs security at all times. Like those are his words.
But I want the guy in charge of all the data to be a very calm, cool nerd, not some guy who looks frantic like this, like Alex Karp does.
Well, give me like an early 1980s Pan Am pilot before they went under.
Absolutely.
Somebody who's been through a little bit, and okay, maybe he has a drink or two on his off hours, but mostly he's just there to get you safe and get you home. All right, you guys, we're going to be going through a little bit of turbulence, but it's okay. That's who you want. You don't want wacky hair, inflatable arm guy.
Yeah, that's a good parallel too. But I think it's the point is that it demonstrates that they're very, very uncomfortable right now. Because he's erratic anyway, but he's put out there because they, knowledgeable, I guess, or whatever. But all of them, we can play the short compilation of Thiel as well. And this is it's not just today, you understand, as you pointed out before. It's when they get asked about what they're doing in Israel, they seem to melt down. I think that says a lot. So you want to keep playing this, guys?
Sure.
Administration I was walking over here. I picked a random engineer, and I said, by the way, we have a contest. Find all the technically absolutely erroneous things in this article in 90 seconds. And I picked a random engineer. I was like, well, how many do you think you could do in 90 seconds? He's like, well, 15, 20.
Why 90?
But leaving aside the technical, look, it's probably
wrong.
hard
Is that
for
what you're
them,
saying?
I'm sure. Well, it's not. Well, first of all, on the tech side, It is so ridiculous. I read the New York Times. It's literally like I'm a dyslexic. They might as well be hiring me to do a spelling bee. So, maybe they just have friends who are tech bros, but they can't hire on a meritocratic basis. I don't know. So that's up to them. We have a contest. Find all the errors in 90 seconds. I think somebody will find 50 or 60. But the more important thing is we are not surveilling Americans. We are not building a database to surveil them. And if you wanted to do that, the last platform in the world you would buy is Palantir. And don't believe me, spend 10 minutes and look at the architecture of our product. 10 minutes. And then see how ridiculous that is. By the way, writing ridiculous shit in a highly charged environment is dangerous. And the New York Times should take responsibility for the danger they're putting out in the world. There really are people who believe that crap.
Well,
they believe that.
One thing that's true, though, is that you have increased your contracts with the government, and that has accelerated
so
under the Trump administration.
Of course, but by the way, even there, a mathematically somewhat moderately literate person would say, okay, well, they're increasing the government by 45%. That's pretty baller. How are they increasing in the U.S. commercial? 71%. Are we building a database to conspire against our own people in the U.S. commercial context with no sales force? So we're winning. Yeah, great. You know what? Tell everybody we're winning. We are winning. And by the way, we have a rule of 83 why we do it. Basically means we don't have or have basically a net sales force, and we're winning. And we know what?
What's that? Go ahead.
I was just saying he definitely seems like he's on drugs, and I don't even mean that in a jokey way. Like literally, he seems like he got hopped up, and maybe it was just the nerves or whatever. I was gonna say too that we've seen the Thiel clip. He can't answer any questions. Karp, the other one I think Jason was referring to. There's this one, but there's also him being confronted at like a campus and a woman screaming, saying, "Your technology kills Palestinians. Your technology kills Palestinians," and he's just like,
Which one?
I don't think these. I mean, we have to remember that a lot of these big tech folks they sort of, including Elon, some of them proudly claim that they're on the autism spectrum, right? So maybe there's some element of that. But I just think in general, this is a super defensive response.
Yes.
Like the way he's acting is not the way somebody who's confident and is like, no, they're incorrect. I'm here with my attorney. Here's the statements that are wrong, whatever. It's just flipping out and assuring everybody that we're winning, we're making money, we're doing this. And and then claiming in 90 seconds they can find 50 to 60 things wrong. Not to come to the defense of the New York Times or anything, because as I said earlier, a lot of the stuff in the Times article is stuff that's been out in independent media for quite a while, just taking note of the different relationships, as well as noticing the Trump executive order. As soon as it happened, I remember seeing that and thinking, here's some post 9/11 talk again. We need to remove the borders between different agencies because, 9/11 happened because these agencies couldn't talk to each other quick enough.
Right.
It's the same stuff. And Trump's executive order was streamlining that and taking the agencies out of being in separate silos and making it easier for them to communicate and work together to fight bad guys or whatever. And that's exactly the role that Palantir is playing. And of course, he doesn't get into, as everything we've already covered today, CIA connections. Nobody at all in the mainstream, of course, is going to ask these guys about their relationship and their steering committee spots at the Bilderberg Group and things of that sort.
I just want to jump in quick because I think that Derek's right. I mean, I wasn't expecting him to go like full Charlie Sheen Tiger Blood winning, but he does. And one of the weird things that he keeps doing in this is he said, how many mistakes can you find in 90 seconds to an engineer? He says 15. And then he goes, maybe you can find 50 or 60 in 90 seconds. Yeah, he doesn't mention one mistake, right? It seems like And he also throws in the word Neanderthal and pagan. So, I mean, this is like classic smear techniques, right? There's not one, and no point at all did he address, okay, well, they said this, and this is the truth. And he could have done that in any sentence. So I think it kind of does speak. I had not seen this clip, I'll be honest. I'd only seen other clips. Every time the guy gets challenged and he just doesn't have an open forum to spew his Johnny nonsense, he gets extremely uncomfortable. And I mean, yeah, he was wacky, inflatable. I like to use my hands. He was using a lot of handage right there, but not saying a lot. So if you want to continue, I'm enthralled.
Yeah. Well, just real quickly, the point you're making is important, or in general, this is what they put out right afterward. And I think this is very relevant. It says the recently published New York article by the New York Times is blatantly untrue, but it says Palantir never collects data to unlawfully surveil Americans. Now that's a big difference than what he just said. And he's saying we don't surveil people. Well, that's not what he said there. And I think the main point is they're trying to make the subtle argument that we're doing so, but it's because the president wants us to, or because that's what our legislation says, or whatever. And even then you could argue just because the president says it or there's legislation doesn't then make it legal. That's a whole important thing to think about, but that's just very important. The story continues to evolve as he makes the narrative. And I think you've all made some very good points here. Let's keep watching.
The word unlawfully is doing a lot of work there, right?
Exactly.
Unlawfully. But I got to dip, guys. Thanks for having me on, Ryan, and everybody. And I'll see you guys on the next panel.
Awesome, brother. See you then.
Because the product is the best in the world. And you know what the Trump administration is actually doing? Every other government in the world is doing, because everyone wants to beat China, who's not China, is buy the best product. What is the best product? They're not buying our product because they like me or they like my speeches. Honestly, he's wondering why he has to buy the product from me too.
He just said that everybody wants to be like China. Just so that's clear. I just think there's the many things he says in this that are him, I think, erratically trying to escape this. And he's calling, woke left, woke right. The idea that if we understand that the U.S. government at the very least is striving to be like China, I think we already know that. That's just that's not what they want him to say. That's what I would think.
He's not lying in this. The thing is that everybody in his world does want it to be like China. He's just pulling off. He's drawing off of everybody at Bilderberg, everybody at the WEF, everybody in Silicon Valley. Everybody wants to be like China. No. You guys want it to be like China. The rest of us want nothing to do with it. But he's so in the cult that in his world, it's everybody.
That's a great point. And that speaks to just them being completely out of touch. There's might as well a different species today in the billionaire oligarch elitists and everybody else. There is a very interesting distance that has developed in that regard.
Buy it because I'm going to make your company really, really financially strong, more secure, more efficient, increase the revenues. Why does the U.S. government buy the product? First of all, it's a product. It's not a waste of time service BS thing that can be abused. By the way, we lost so much revenue in the last 20 years because people wanted to buy things that could be abused. It's really hard to abuse Palantir. You could do services. Who knows what a services company is doing with your data? Or you could do what the New York Times does or consumer internet does. You could resell the data and productize your users. By the way, there's a high correlation between productizing your users and selling them woke pagan BS.
It's a good point. What are you doing at the IRS?
You can't get that with Palantir, but you can't.
The IRS was one example.
Yeah, we have so many contracts in the U.S. government. I'll tell you, without the specifics, I can tell you exactly what we're doing in the IRS. We're going to use the most secure platform in the world to replace inept software with cheaper, better software that is more efficient. That's what we're doing. I assume at the IRS, we have so many contracts. I know that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing with 71% of growth. You know what we're doing in the DoD? We're scaring the bejeebers, I'm trying not to use the F word, out of our adversaries by making them scared at night. And you know how we're doing it? By installing productized software that runs algorithms against data that's been lawfully collected. And you can't unlawfully use it.
So you are surveilling Americans. I'm glad we cleared that up at the end of the interview when you said in the beginning that you weren't surveilling Americans flatly. That seems relevant.
I think that in the new Terminator movie, they come back to get him, don't they? He's the guy that they come back from the future, right? That's the guy that they've made the calculation. We got to take him out.
Oops. Missed that up. There we go.
After making a quick stop at Curtis Yarvin's house.
How did I fix that up? Hold on. How do I get back to the right spot here? There we go. So sorry, I just hit the wrong button there. But this was the extension of the point, is that on Wired, this is yesterday. Palantir is going on defense, and that doesn't mean working with the Defense Department. Like Palantir threatened to call the police on a Wired reporter and kicked out the other journalists from a recent conference following reports on what's going on right now. They're analytics with the Trump administration. So this is, again, as we've been pointing out, this is not what it looks like to explain that you're being misrepresented, especially with the most powerful backing and friends in the world. Like, why would he feel so? Like, I just get the sense that they are concerned. And I know it's not really in our benefit to think that, because who knows? But I get that sense that that's desperation. I don't know what you guys think. And all these kind of moves show that they're circling the wagons to a degree. Anybody disagree or confirm? What do you think?
I'd be very careful if I were a reporter digging into Palantir. You know what I mean? It's an extremely dangerous company, and for you may work at Wired and you think you're going to do a story. These guys are they're just dangerous, and this is a very I don't know, important time for people to be paying attention to what's going on. Unfortunately, they're not. I feel the vast majority of people are falling asleep at the wheel. But I would say continue the pressure, especially if you've got a video interview with a guy like Alex Karp or Peter Thiel. Treat it like a police interrogation. Keep that guy talking as much as he can. The more he says, the more he steps on his dick over and over again and says something that, like everybody wants to be like China. You're not supposed to say that. That's not supposed to come out. That's not that's not the messaging that you want. I honestly, if I were, I'm not trying to give these guys any ideas, but from my media training background, I'd get this guy as far away from television cameras as possible.
Right.
And he would be the last interview he ever did.
Doesn't that add an interesting point to this, though? Like, so why? That's, I think, something I ask all the time when you see them do something ridiculous, or a politician does something. You're like, where are their handlers? Don't they say that's not the right thing to do? And it makes you wonder then why. That's not all encompassing, but why they would, And so in this case, why are we seeing this happen? Why are these people being chosen to put out front? It makes me question whether I think that there's an outside influence that is in whether collapsing this country or overtaking it or manipulating policy. I think that may be a large part of it. I don't think our current government, as we see it, is truly dictating everything that's happening here. Go ahead.
There are systems have redundancies in place. They have fail safes, to make a historical comparison, there was the quiz show scandal in the late 50s, early 60s, in which Congress started investigating the quiz shows. And the response was to wheel out the contestants that had cheated under probably instruction from producers and everything, and they were made to apologize and everything, and everyone started talking about the contestants. No rules really changed, and nobody really cared. In this situation, you have Palantir, which is getting some negative press. So what do? You wheel out Captain Crazy Arms to spout nonsense on MSNBC for 2 hours, and suddenly he becomes associated with Palantir completely. He's the one defending it. He gets kicked out by his board, or he gets sent down on some trumped up corruption thing, and people can say the problem has resolved itself. Palantir can be broken up. Palantir doesn't exist anymore, but instead we'll have Barad-Dur. We'll have Barad-Dur Communications, and they will take over the staff and take over the technology, but they won't be Palantir anymore, and people will consider things to have changed.
Yeah, and you could say the same thing with Elon Musk and Trump. That that kind of idea could be applied to any of these. That's an excellent point.
Well, it's already happened with Eric Prince and Blackwater, and now Academy.
Right.
And now Eric Prince is, up to his neck in the private prison in El Salvador game, along with sending 150 mercs to Haiti in the last week and a half, and a whole bunch of other fun stuff. And yeah, all he had to do was rebrand a little bit. It's a little rebranding goes a long way. Really does.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get into the kind of the final part of this in regard to as I see, the AI element of it all, and the possibility, as my mind goes to, where I think the large part of this is simply AI government, not necessarily AI governance, which is part of what's happening now using the GSAI bot and different things, the commerce point in the bill, but like an AI government kind of idea, or any other direction you want to take it in. Palantir AI how that applies. Before we jump in, I'll just read a couple things from a great article that Off Guardian put out recently. Just general points I thought were interesting, and they simply wrote that this isn't about protecting freedom. That seems to be the very clear overlap to all of this. It's about rendering freedom obsolete, and I thought that was a very perfect way to think about that. As well as Palantir itself admits that its mission is to augment human decision making, and so I think that you just can't miss, especially with the bill aspect, whether it goes through Senate or not. That's what they're putting forward. So, anybody want to jump in where you want to go with it? Go ahead.
I just want to talk about the AI aspect because, again, that's making, mainstream media or mainstream alternative media that in this big, beautiful bill, supposedly you're going to have this 10-year window where AI cannot be prosecuted or you can't sue it, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's almost a moot point. I think that's just solidifying or codifying what's already been going on from the first Trump administration into the Biden administration, especially with the Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer program, and now into the Trump administration. I have literally heard nobody else in media talk about the CAIO program that clearly outlines that you have the intelligence community and the defense community, and they are allowed to do with whatever they want with AI, and it is unauditable. And then there's subsidiaries that they work with. Everybody else has to have a chief artificial intelligence officer put into their private company that has a security clearance, and they can be audited at all times. That means there will literally be no innovation outside of government innovation. And it is that kind of walled garden that Mark Andreessen alluded to. But I have not seen how it's been fixed. I've only seen how it's getting worse and worse and worse.
It's because he thinks the good elitists, which are them, are going to save you. And you'll be in the same place, though, but they'll just rule the way that's what he basically argues.
I mean, again, when you have that walled garden, where in order to use this software or develop hardware, you have to have constant government oversight in a classified realm. There's no way that you can become there's no capitalist model there, right? Unless it's fascist, right? I mean, we're going to pick the winners and losers. You get out of line, we're going to put you out of business. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Really the last real technology company that made a big splash that wasn't government subsidized was YouTube. And they got bought up by Google, which is just a rebrand of the government, right? I mean, I can't name another one that's had a huge impact socially or basically technologically. Can anybody out there in a commercial sense that hasn't been hampered or pushed by the government?
No, because if you need government, if you need licensing, you always fall in some way. You wind up under the thumb of the government. You have to do what they say in order to get the licensing. I can't think of one.
I don't know one. So again, I think that we're in a really odd spot. Artificial intelligence is becoming more and more commercially available in many other avenues. Video creation. I'm using it for my thumbnails. Obviously, you have the ChatGPTs of the world. We just did our panel on AI, and a lot of that was the talk of using it for research. If you're now going to be feeding these language models certain types of information, and you're going to try to utilize lower and lower power. I mean, you look at DeepSeek in China, right? Just the fact that it was able to run on lower power. To have that walled off from the public is extremely dangerous, especially with the deceptive nature of AI. But it also, forget about the resource allocation, forget about the automation. Think of the narrative management. Like, the AI, in essence, the approved AI, is going to tell us what's real and what's not, what's a deep fake and what's not. And we're already seeing it create, some of it's fun. I talked about it the other day. I love a good parody song. Some of these videos are entertaining. I'm sure everybody saw that Door Brothers video that went viral with, Mark Zuckerberg as a lizard person, and Donald Trump at a swingers party, and Kamala Harris as a communist.
To me, though, all that is we'll make their arms work again, Neuralink, which is true, maybe, but it's not really what it's really all about. It's like that's the window dressing to get you. That's the bread and circuses as they, recreate history on a digital level in the background. Whatever we're talking about.
It's the backbone of the trust era for the product. Yeah.
Well, again, like I said, that's the stuff that's been able to go viral and kind of pierce maybe our arena, right? I wouldn't say it's mainstreaming. But in short order, again, we're going to see more and more of this stuff. It is going to be advocated as real, and the AI is going to constantly tell us that it's real. And how many people aren't questioning a damn thing? How many kids right now are going to Chat GPT to finish up their homework? It's a lot more than people think. And, a lot of people don't realize that they can take Copilot off Windows. Now, I'm not saying Windows is perfect or that it's not a defense, Microsoft isn't a defense company, but most people aren't even thinking of opting out, let alone figuring it out. They're embracing it. And I think that's a huge issue. And again, that walled garden is the big issue because yeah, we're talking about Palantir mostly today, but how many people are talking about that walled garden and what it means for all of these companies, military, industrial complex, or otherwise?
Jason, you mentioned how YouTube was doing this technology and then it wound up getting acquired by Google. I can envision a scenario in which in the future there becomes a company who is known as the gold standard for telling you whether it's AI fake or whether it's real. And it just gets... Everybody knows that that's who you go to. That's Google it, right? Well, whatever this new company is, do that to it, right? And it gets known for it. And then that company will get subverted and compromised or bought or maybe even created from out of thin air with an understanding that that's going to be the role of it. Yeah, the fact checker, when the AI fact checker, the gold standard of AI fact checking is actually compromised. But if you want to do that the right way, then you need to be accurate for a while, right? You need to be 100% great at it, and then maybe it drops off to 95%, and then maybe it's just a little here, a little tweak there. But you've always got to maintain that it's working. You've got to do it that way in order to suck people in, and then they'll, as soon as they develop this level of trust where they outsource their thinking to this and they run it through their brand new AI bullshit detector, then it goes, well, it came back as good. Well, maybe it is good. But maybe what if it's that one little sliver? Maybe it's just in an area that you never even touch, but it has to do with the videos you see coming out of Israel or something like that. That's where they do. I could see that being the next a technological, transformative company that we wind up trusting in the future, only to be bamboozled by it.
Well, remember now,
real quickly, that's a very prescient statement for those out there watching. I think we all probably agree with that right now. That's a really great point. So make a note of that, save that clip. That's going to come to pass. Again, I would argue it's going to be the whole, they created it as a front kind of thing, probably an Israeli company as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I'm just saying right now, like kind of an offshoot of that is Sam Altman's World ID company. WorldCoin, this is not only putting you on the blockchain as a person, but it's ensuring that you are not a deep fake, that you are not a computer generation. And it's doing so by taking your biometric information, you integrating on this blockchain network. And I'm not sure how far it's going to go, but again, they've taken the orb and they've made the Orb Mini that looks a lot more like a cell phone, which we're acclimated to. The Lochnar was a tough sell. And they've moved to the United States. They've gone to some pretty hip and cool spots. Remember, initially when this launched 2 or 3 years ago, they did have a spot where you could scan yourself at the bottom of the World Trade Center. You'd go down the escalators. It was in this kiosk and shop. Now they're in LA. Now they're in Austin, Texas. Now they're in Nashville, Ryan. You can go down. You can go check one out right now. They're trying to integrate it. When you start seeing commercials pop up for it on TV or in your YouTube ads, I think that's where they're going to be mainlining it even more. But I think that Charlie's right. There's going to be other companies that jump in with this technology as well. It doesn't necessarily mean monetizing people or biometrics. It could be just based on those deep fake videos, interactions. Not just going to be videos. I don't do it. I don't do the video calls. Like, I've had a couple girlfriends over the years. They're pissed because I don't have an iPhone. I've FaceTimed literally 0 times in my life. But how many people is that their main line of communication to somebody other than texting? I think that's something that's going to be hacked in the next 3 to 5 years, that you're going to get a FaceTime call. I mean, forget about the terrible bot fishes that want to meet you in Thailand and think you're cute, right? But like, those have gone from your spam DMs to what? Phone calls sometimes. I see them in Telegram all the time. I get text messages on my phone. What if that's a lifelike being? That's almost the argument for WorldCoin right now, but I think it's going to be the argument for a bunch of other tech. That being said, gentlemen, I do have to run. I hate to wrap it a little bit short. I want to thank everybody over at the IMA panel. You guys are kick-ass. I can't wait to do the next one. And everybody can check me out everywhere at Jason Bermas, Bermas. I sent you shade in a DM so you can share it with everybody. Thanks, guys. Folks, that is going to do it. I really hope that you enjoyed that panel. Again, the all-stars were there. Charlie Robinson, okay? Ryan Christian, Kit Knightley, Steve from Slow News Day. Great conversation on this topic that is extremely important, that, guess what, is not about left or right, never going to be, truly about right and wrong, breaking down those party lines. I absolutely love you guys. Consider supporting the broadcast down below, and I will see you all on the flip side.